Let's get educated. That's why we're here, to bring you the stories impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses. It's time for a little education.
Greetings, one and all. Welcome to Educated. I am Katie Project, and I'm joined by Mr. David Fiorazzo. And David has his little show over there called Worldview Matters, and it's big. It's a little big show.
Oh, boy.
Because it takes on the world. Who'd you have on today?
Big topic today with Tony Gurule of Radical Truth. We talked about Islam, Hamas, and the Muslim Brotherhood. And he made some fascinating points. He's been studying this for years. And so we talked about a lot in light of what's happening in the Middle East. But there's an ideology that's driving all this that we need to at least be somewhat familiar with. So that's today's WorldviewMatters.tv. On Rumble, on Freedom Project's Facebook page, on Apple, on Spotify. And please subscribe to our weekly email, worldviewmatters.tv. Important topics.
Yeah, heavy topics.
Some,
but necessary topics as well. Now, before we get started, just a quick reminder that if you enjoy the video platform known as Rumble, we are uploading all of our episodes of Educated and Worldview Matters to our channel over there at the Rumble. So please visit rumble.com/Freedom Project and follow.
All right, it's once again that time to check in with Alex Newman, Mr. or Executive, Mr. Newman, Inc. What story does he have to tell us about this week? They're always interesting. Hey, Alex.
Thanks, guys. Great to be here. Yeah, so really, really good and encouraging news. Turns out Generation Z is not as hopeless as we all thought. A new poll shows that they are 74% more likely to want to homeschool their children. That's according to this explosive new polling data that comes from a group called Age of Learning. They commissioned this survey of over 1,000 parents and people hoping to become parents. And really, the data was incredible. One of the things that it showed that was almost counterintuitive is that people were especially interested in homeschooling in big cities like New York, Atlanta, Las Vegas, Portland, and Miami. Maybe that's because they realize how terrible the government schools are there. But typically, you get higher concentrations of liberals and government bootlickers in those areas. So anyways, that was encouraging. Now, obviously, interest in homeschooling has been soaring for decades. There was a very brief period in human history where governments went crazy and said, nope, parents cannot educate their children. That will be the job of your overlord. I mean, the government, sorry. And so there was this very brief period, really just a few decades in the United States, where government said, no, you can't homeschool. You got to give your children over to the government. We're going to have mandatory attendance laws, compulsory attendance to call it. But it looks like homeschooling is on the rebound. Now, Generation Z, for those not familiar, typically people say that's between like ages of 12 and 26. And what this survey showed is that about half of Generation Z parents and aspiring parents, right, people who are not yet but hope to become parents, said they were considering home education for their children. If you're watching us, you can see it up on your screen right now. 47%. That's amazing. Now, my generation, the so-called millennials, not nearly as high. And then Generation X was just 20%. So interest in homeschooling is absolutely skyrocketing. Now, there is a caveat, a big caveat. Unfortunately, a lot of these Generation Z youngsters have been totally brainwashed by their own government schools. And so, unfortunately, Generation Z respondents are actually more likely than older generations to support government involvement in homeschooling in terms of asking for mandatory testing and in some cases even mandating particular subject matters that need to be taught at home. So that's a little bit troubling, but once they start homeschooling, I imagine they'll come to their senses. Now, these aspiring parents, those who don't have children yet but hope to have them, they are very enthusiastic. According to the data from the survey, 6 in 10 said they were more interested in homeschooling than government schools or private schools. Again, really encouraging data, folks. Homeschooling is the most popular option with Generation Z folks. And the reasons why, you see some of them up on your screen. And this is interesting. The reasons are kind of shifting. Traditionally, the people who were pioneers in homeschooling, or at least in the revival of homeschooling, were interested in making sure their children children were not getting godless or pagan indoctrination. The reasons are shifting now. The most popular reason that people gave, 66% said they wanted to provide a safer environment. I guess all the school shootings and things, the school suicides, the drug abuse, all the rest of it is causing people to realize that these are not safe places for children. Other popular reasons, you had flexible schedules, preventing toxic socialization, which there's none of that going on in the public schools, right? They wanted to provide individualized instruction, and religious reasons were actually very low on the list. Another thing they did, this age of learning, was analyze Google search results, and what they found was that homeschooling was searched more than 1.1 million times over the past year. That's an increase of over 150%. And of course, a lot of smart people don't even use Google anymore. People, I think, who would be more inclined to homeschool are not using Google anymore. So my guess is those numbers are even higher. Plus, you had homeschooling online seeing a 365% boost in searches during that period. Now, they blame the COVID hysteria for part of this. They say, that it gave people the opportunity to do a little bit of homeschooling, and they realized that not only was it doable, but it was fun, and it gave them more flexibility. They could spend more time with their children, which sounded nice for most people, I think. This is really encouraging, folks. And of course, this interest in homeschooling comes as we get other survey results showing that confidence in the government's indoctrination centers posing as schools are at record low levels. Gallup did a survey this summer. They found only 1 in 4 Americans even have a fair amount of confidence in government schools. And you wonder, where do these 1 in 4 Americans come from? Do they live under rocks? Have they been frozen in time? I don't know. But how 1/4 of our fellow Americans could have confidence in these outrageous indoctrination centers beats me. But folks, as the interest in homeschooling continues to surge, the educational totalitarians who want to brainwash your children, they are foaming at the mouth. They're losing their minds. And so you can expect more attacks. That fringe left-wing weirdo, John Oliver, apparently he's got some TV show. I've never seen it, but I heard some conservatives making fun of him. He just did a whole big long monologue demonizing homeschooling, suggesting that people who homeschool might be Nazis. So that'll work real well. Good luck with that, educational totalitarians. But anyways, folks, this is really encouraging news. Despite the endless pronouncement that Generation Z was finally going to lead us into communist utopia, it looks like they might not be quite as pliable as the establishment would have liked. So these new numbers on homeschooling, folks, are really encouraging. Maybe it will be Generation Z that leads us back to freedom. Thanks, guys.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show. I am Dr. Duke, and I am joined today by Vicki McKenna. Vicki, as always, welcome to the program.
Great to be here. Can't wait.
So we got a bunch of college kids, as we see now globally. We have college kids who actually are fighting for social justice while cheering on the beheading of babies, the charring of their bodies, the rape, the sodomizing, let me just say, of Israeli young women and the murder of grandparents. And that same group of morally bankrupt morons is also this group we're going to talk about today. The LGBTQIA+, as you would say, the LGBTQWTF, students at Clemson in South Carolina are marching in protest because they want the return of tampons to men's bathrooms, Vicki. This is one of the great issues of our day that they're taking a stand on. When they're calling for the death of more Israelis and they're asking for tampons for men, I guess, man, what can you get even more? Is it possible to be more woke than this, Vicki?
Well, this is what social justice really means. It means destruction. It means nihilism. You and I recently had a conversation on why the left makes common cause with vicious murderers, Islamic murderers. And that is because all they're looking to do is to tear down a civilization, in this case, Western civilization. Hamas hates Western civilization as it's idealized by Israel and the United States, and the left hates Western civilization as it's idealized by Israel and the United States. So this is all about tearing down structures, systems, culture, institutions, taboos and mores, and even common sense. Because common sense, of course, is proof of colonization. We should put up a link to our recent long discussion about decolonization, Duke. But it's part of the same nihilistic nuttiness that's very, very dangerous, but it presents sometimes as absurdity. So you're sort of inclined to just roll your eyes and just think it's not something that's a big deal. But it is. In this case, it's about breaking down the difference between male and female. And if you break down the difference between male and female, you break down Western law, you break down Western society, you create utter chaos, interpersonal and societal chaos. And that's their goal. Their goal is to create chaos, which allows someone else to seize control and ultimately allows their kind to seize power. So we should pay attention to this. But just on its face, it is so absurd that back in 2015, when all of this started, when Barack Obama was issuing, subtle changes to language in Title IX, how is it that not everybody stood up and pointed and started laughing at the stupidity of the whole thing, at least putting this trans madness, maybe, putting their boot on the neck of it before it got so out of hand that now we're contending with crap like this, and we are supposed to take a march for tampons in men's rooms seriously.
So we do have imagery. Take a look. This is the decolonization of our bathrooms. Apparently, men's rooms are places of oppression unless there are tampons in those bathrooms. And you can see here's the Clemson University demands, the LGBTQ demands. This is why we march demands. 1, we demand revisions to the student code of conduct that applies to non-discrimination and anti-harassment policy on the basis of race, color, blah, 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 to student organizations. They are angry that Republicans, college Republicans on the campus of Clemson, protested and mocked tampons in the men's room, which is one of the reasons why they were removed by Clemson. And so now they want the power, the LGBTQ, to punish the Republican organizations for not agreeing with them. Number 2, we demand the return of the menstrual dispensaries within the men's restroom at Cooper Library, and for Clemson University to release a formal statement condemning their vandalization with hateful, transphobic language. And finally, we demand repercussions towards the Clemson College Republicans for contributing to a campus climate that encourages transphobic rhetoric and jeopardizes the safety of the LGBTQ. And I got to ask you before you immediately start blowing up, because I know you're going to, got to ask you. So explain to me how not allowing a man in a men's bathroom to stick a tampon up his rear, how is that terrorism of LGBTQ kids? I'll wait for your answer.
You're not allowed to, I must have that tampon. So what they're basically saying is women who want to pretend to be men need tampons. Let's cut through this. It's not even men stuffing tampons up their backsides. It's women who need tampons because they have their period. By the way, let me just say this. Women are not even going to grab the tampons because women are so freaked out at this point because the feminists have basically told all women that their periods are punishment from God or some part of the patriarchy, that they don't like to use tampons. So if you really wanted to make a statement, you'd say we need maxi pads in the men's room.
There is much more to talk about, but for the rest of the story, check out the full episode of The Dr. Duke Show.
Today's show is sponsored by our friends at MyPillow. Save up to 66% on pristine quality bedding, towels, slippers, signature pillows, and much more when you use the code EDUCATED. That's EDUCATED, educated. Support this show and a great American company.
Hello, America. Welcome to One Nation. I'm your host, Dr. Jake Jacobs. It was January 30th, 1939, and Adolf Hitler was speaking before the Reichstag. In his speech, he called for the annihilation, the extermination of all the Jews of Europe and all the Jews of the world. It was in newspapers all around the world. The world knew his intentions. Now, Hitler took over power in 1933. In newspapers and on radio, they had been exposing the demonic worldview, the words and ideas of Adolf Hitler and of the National Socialists. Hitler's hatred and desire to exterminate the Jews was known all throughout Europe. It was known all throughout the newspapers. I'm serious. This is before the internet. I did microfiche research during my graduate degree and literally unfolded the media back in the 1930s. Hitler's calling for the extermination of the Jews. And simply, all you had to do was read his evil book, Mein Kampf, to know his ultimate goal. Now, Nazi propaganda was replete with teaching pictures of the Jews being evil and demonic and rats and vermin, etc. There was a slide presentation for the Hitler Youth. Now, I have it up here in German, and let me translate what it says in English. It says here, the first two words says, Das Judentum. Remember that term, Das Judentum. Judaism was always a nation with racial characteristics and never a religion. The Jew is a parasite. Where he appears, the host nation dies. Adolf Hitler. Now that word Das Judentum, it's very interesting because you saw propaganda posters all throughout Nazi Germany that had signs like you see right now. Judentum ist Verbrechentum. Judaism is criminal. Now, what happens, unfortunately, is when that word Judentum is translated, it gets translated into the word Jewry. Not jewelry, but Jewry, meaning the Jews. But the thing of it is Hitler said, look, Judentum, they say it's Judaism, but what it is, it represents the Jewish people, and it's not really religion, it is blood. This goes into the National Socialistic viewpoint of blood cult, of the Übermensch, the superior race, and the Untermensch, the inferior race, the evil Jews. That in itself is fascinating, but that's not what I want to get at right now, is this occultic world of Nazism. That word Judentum is the word for Judaism. And what you see happening here is that the National Socialists were at war with Judaism, the mother of Christianity. And in essence, Hitler, the National Socialists, were at war. It was a Weltanschauung, a worldview war against Christian, Judeo-Christian Western civilization. Now, back in the 1930s and 40s, we saw that in FDR's administration, there were a number of anti-Semites. I hate that word anti-Semite. It was created by an anti-Semite in 1879 by the name of Wilhelm Marr, who wanted to have a scientific term that talked about, the hatred of the Jews. And what it really is, anti-Semitism just simply means Jew hate. Judenhass, the German word Juden is Jew, Hass is hate. It's Judenhass, it's Jew hate. Well, there were Jew haters permeated all throughout FDR's State Department. One in particular was a gentleman by the name of Breckinridge Long. And he was the man within the State Department responsible for visas, for immigration from Europe coming into the United States, and he hated Jews. In fact, in his 1938 diary, he talked about his admiration for the fascist Benito Mussolini and about his admiration for the National Socialist Adolf Hitler. Listen to what he said here. He said, I have just finished Hitler's Mein Kampf. It is eloquent in its opposition of Judentum, Jewry, and to Jews as exponents of communism and chaos. My estimate of Hitler as a man rises with the reading of his book. Now stop and think of this. This is not a full indictment on FDR, full indictment on the complete Franklin Delano Roosevelt administration, because we do know there were individuals within his Treasury Department, within good good individuals within the State Department and the Pentagon that understood the nefarious nature of National Socialism. And American Marines and American Army and American Navy were dying to eradicate socialism, National Socialism, from the face of the earth. But that Breckinridge Long was responsible for possibly up to 250,000 Jews in the late 1930s and early 1940s for not being able to come into the United States of America. By 1944, the Secretary of Treasury, who happened to be Jewish, Henry Morgenthau Jr., and his assistant, they delivered a report to FDR in 1944. Remember, I wear a ring that says 1944 because it's the year my father left the United States to go fight the Imperial Japanese. And 44 was an incredible year in world American history. Battle of the Bulge, invasion of France to liberate Europe from the National Socialists. But this report, going back to the report by the Secretary of Treasury, Henry Morgenthau, was called Report to the Secretary on the Acquiescence of This Government in the Murder of the Jews. It was in America. It was in our government during World War II. But thank God that the Allies, the Americans, the Brits, the Canadians, and others, we defeated National Socialism and we stopped the Shoah, the horrible Holocaust, where 6 million Jews were exterminated and annihilated by the Nazis. And wonderfully, miraculously, within 4 years of that, there was the rebirth of the nation of Israel on May 14th, 1948. Guys, there is so much more to say, but for the rest of the story, watch the full episode of One Nation.
If you have a smartphone, tablet, Roku, or Apple TV, consider downloading the Freedom Project Media app. It's 100% free and includes all of our weekly shows, plus lecture series, archive programs, and award-winning animated videos for families like the Presidential Minute, Battles of America, and Heroes of the West. Don't rely on the social media giants to keep you informed. Simply download the Freedom Project Media app from your app store and allow notifications. And we'll let you know when a new video is ready.
All right, friends, with construction costs through the roof, it was only a matter of time before someone else attempted to build a better mousetrap. Enter Icon, a Texas company that has created the technology to build a 4-bedroom home in 2 weeks using a 3D printer. Let's take a look.
What you're watching is the building, actually the printing of a 4-bedroom home. On this construction site, there's no hammering or sawing, just a nozzle squirting out concrete, kind of like an oversized soft-serve ice cream dispenser, laying down the walls of a house one layer at a time. It's the brainchild of a 41-year-old Texan who's rarely without his cowboy hat, Jason Ballard.
3D printing a house.
Yes, ma'am.
People are going to hear that and say no.
We're sitting inside one right now.
This house was printed.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh,
There you are.
look at this.
Welcome.
And so was this one. Does a concrete home printed by a robot have to look cold and industrial? Maybe not.
I like the curved wall.
Ballard gave us a peek at the first completed model home in what will soon be the world's first large community of 3D printed houses, 100 of them, part of a huge new development north of Austin. They'll start in the high $400,000 range. For now, as Jason Ballard showed us, Icon is only 3D printing walls with cutouts for plumbing and electricity. Roofs, windows, and insulation are added the old-fashioned way by construction workers.
You say it's faster, more efficient.
Yes.
Why do you say that?
What you've got, let's count the materials. Siding 1, moisture barrier 2, sheathing 3, stud 4, drywall 5, and then float tape and texture. You can count that either as 1 or 3. But you've got at least half a dozen novel steps that have to take place to deliver an American stick frame wall system. By comparison, we need a single material supply chain delivered by a robot.
Wow.
Now, the owners of the company say that since their 3D printed homes don't use traditional materials, it makes them fire resistant, flood resistant, and they can withstand a hurricane or a tornado. And of course, they may one day be used to colonize Mars. So Icon says using the new method saves tens of thousands of dollars on workers and wasted materials. Right now, you kind of heard it, but the cost to build a 4-bedroom 3D printed home is just under that, $500,000. So,
wow,
interesting.
Wow, it looks. I mean, I'm not picky about how it looks necessarily, but I'm thinking about insulation. I guess Texas, you want it to be cool. So the cement, cool. I'm wondering.
Arizona, maybe they'd be like, "Ooh, this is kind of fun." All those retirees who go to Arizona, they can all have that house. But by us, I don't know.
But when I saw the foundations laid there in that whatever that place is north of Austin, they're planning on doing a lot, like whole neighborhoods.
Well, it makes sense then, because you're like, wow, for one house, that giant machine to be able to do that, but that machine just is moving over the next lot and the next lot. So
and you got to keep filling it with cement.
So just look at each of those plots and go $500,000, $500,000, $500,000, $500,000. Yeah, that guy with his little hat, he's gonna be able to afford a lot more of those.
Wow.
Fancier hats even.
Interesting.
I wouldn't get it, but
so is that technically a 3D printer? I know the design and it's computerized as far as what the machine is going around.
At what point do we call it not anymore? That's a great question.
Yeah, look at that.
I don't know. It does look like an ice cream.
Pouring out cement. Yeah,
it does look like it's ice cream. Like,
That's just fascinating to me. Practicality, I don't know.
Yeah.
Jury's out.
Jury's out on that one. This is true. All right. Well, that's going to wrap up Educated for this week. Now, don't forget, you can catch Educated on the go by simply subscribing to the podcast on your favorite platform.
Yes.
And if you could be so kind, I mean, it's October, so it's in another day that ends in Y. So if you would leave us a 5-star review, that'd be swell of you.
Sure. Please do. And share. For Katie and myself, thanks for watching, listening, sharing, supporting the show. Until next week, stay educated, America.